Hi crafty friends, Shana from ShanoukiArt. Today I want to show you the supply list of what you'll need to join me for Art Journal August. Just to clarify, you don't need everything that is on my supply list. I will give you an idea of the basics that you'll need, but please do look through all your craft supplies and use what you have. The idea is that everyone should be able to join in, whether you have a lot of supplies or just a few. If you want to know a little more about what Art Journal August is all about, I will put a full description in the description box below explaining the details. To start off with, we're going to need something to work in or on. I have the small art journal that I created specifically for Art Journal August. It is what I call a zigzag journal. So it's a very small journal, it's 4 inches by 4 inches, but it has a signature in the front and a signature in the back. I have a tutorial on how to make one of these. I will link that in the description box below. They were also available to purchase in some Art Journal August kits that I made. You don't need one like this, you just need something to work in. The reason I made it small was that I didn't want this project to be intimidating, especially if you're new to art journaling. Sometimes bigger pages are scary, so small pages are easier to work on, and when you're working in a smaller space, it doesn't feel so overwhelming. If you have an existing art journal you're working on, you can work in that. You can work in an old book. You can work on a piece of paper, on playing cards, on small bits of cardboard, on watercolor paper, on anything you have. You just need some kind of surface to work on. We're then going to need some kind of adhesive. I always work with Mod Podge. As you can see, I have a really big tub here. I use it for everything. I use it for all my gluing. I just love the ease of use of it. It doesn't remain tacky. It's just my favorite. But you don't have to go out and buy Mod Podge. You can just use craft glue or gel medium if you have. You could also use a glue stick, but I wouldn't recommend a glue stick for everything. You will need some kind of a wet glue, so for some of the collaging that we're going to do. There are cheap wet glues out there. For example, this PVA glue available from Kmart in Australia is just $2. So do find something that's cost effective, but I'm sure most of us have some form of glue in our craft room. We will also then have, or if you have, is double-sided tape. Not essential, but can be handy for some of the things we're going to stick down. Do have a glue stick too. Although we're not going to use it for everything, it does come in handy. The next thing that we're going to use, which I use a lot of, is white gesso. So I would recommend getting some. I use it probably on all the pages. I just love the look it gives. I will explain why I use it and how I use it. If you don't want to go out and buy a gesso, you can make your own. I do have a recipe on how to make that. Again, all the links will be down below. So we'll need some gesso, and then I'm also going to be working with texture paste. Now, you don't have to go out and buy texture paste if you don't have it. If you have a gesso, you can take a little bit out of the gesso and then put in a little bit of baby powder or even cornstarch and mix it up, and it comes out a little bit thicker, so it is like a texture paste and will work just the same. Then if you have some masking tape, a lot of people have this just sort of in their garage for other handy things. I love using this to create texture. Not essential, but if you have some masking tape, keep that handy. We're then going to need some paintbrushes. You don't need a lot. 1 or 2 is fine. I would recommend a medium flat paintbrush. That's great for mark making, so I'm going to be using one of these. I also have a wide flat paintbrush, which is good for pasting down on larger areas. I then have a small round and a larger round one, and then a fan paintbrush. The fan paintbrush is great for creating splatter, which I create a lot of, but you don't have to have one of these. Splatter can work just fine with a smaller paintbrush. So get a few paintbrushes together, use what you have, or if you're going to buy, just buy 1 or 2 inexpensive ones. We're also going to need some kind of a palette knife to be spreading our texture paste and some of our gesso. If you don't have a palette knife, you can use an old credit card or a stiff piece of cardboard. That'll work just fine too. If you have an awl, that's great. We're going to be piercing some holes. If you don't have an awl, you can use maybe a knitting needle or even a thick sewing needle. Just something pointy that you can get through the paper to create some holes. I also am going to use a black watercolor pencil. I use this a lot. They're not really very expensive, so if you wanted to go out and get one, you don't have to have one again. You can leave this part out when I'm creating it in the journal. You don't have to include this, but if you wanted to follow along with me, I use this a lot, and it gives a beautiful effect to the pages and the page edges. I also have two fine liner pens, a thicker one and a thinner one. I use these quite a lot too. Or even if you just have a marker like a Posca pen in black, that'll also work fine. A pencil, if you have one, just to maybe draw some lines or to create some additional markings on the paper. I'm going to use a couple of Posca pens. I have quite a few colors, but if you only have one color, that's fine. We can work with just one color on the page. So if you have a Posca pen or any kind of acrylic marker, those will work fine too, so bring those along. I'm also using a correction pen, also known as whiteout or tipex. This is great for creating marks on a page, added interest. Not essential, but a great little tool to have for white marks on your mixed media. We're going to need some kind of scrap papers. If you have some scrapbook paper that is left over from other projects, that'll work great. If you have old book pages, music papers, any kind of magazine paper, anything like this with colors, bring that along because we're going to be creating some interesting backgrounds. And it's a great way to use up all your scraps. We're then also going to need some full pages that we're going to work on to create some collage paper. I've got book pages. I have a page from an old diary. I have a graph paper from a spiral book, some music paper, any kind of paper that you have. Again, we can use that up to create some beautiful background papers. If you have a couple of stencils or even just one stencil, that would be great. Obviously, I have a few. I've been doing this for quite a while, but just one stencil would work great too. You can use the same stencil for all the stenciling work we're going to do. We're then going to need a napkin. I prefer to use, and I find easier to use, ones with florals. So if you can find something that has like a floral bouquet or something with some flowers, I find that the easiest to work with. But see what napkins you have. We only need one. We actually only need a piece of one. So hopefully you can find something that is usable for your projects. We're then going to need some scissors, maybe a small one for fussy cutting and a larger one for cutting, whatever you have. If you have a small envelope, it doesn't have to be white, it doesn't have to be an envelope. We're going to be using this for a page extension. This one is a little old and stuck, which doesn't matter because we're going to still be able to use it. So if you have an envelope, a smallish one, that'll work. If not, just a scrap piece of paper that's sort of about this size. I will show you how to attach it. Doesn't have to be an envelope. I just wanted to find a use for these small envelopes that I have. Just an extra piece of card will work just fine. We're then going to need some color. So whatever paints you have, whether they're acrylic or watercolor, bring them along, even if you have just one color. So I'm going to be working a lot with acrylic paints. I have different kinds. You can also use watercolors. I have this one. A lot of people ask me about this paint set. I actually got this off AliExpress about 7 years ago. And it actually has worked out really great. It's got beautiful colors. It's got good pigment. The brand was ShanoukiArt on the box when I bought it. But like I said, it was a really, really long time ago. You can always check on eBay for watercolor palettes and see what comes up. If I do find this again, I will link it into the description box of my videos. But I haven't found it since I've bought it. But I do get a lot of questions. Sorry, I can't help with how to get one of these. So even if you have watercolor or the little standalone watercolor paints, if you have any kind of color medium, I have these acrylic crayons, I have watercolor pigment powders, gelatos, inks with ink blenders. If you only have one of these, that's fine. If you only have one color, that is fine too. Just bring it along, but you need some kind of a color medium. We then also will need, if you can get, is a fine tip applicator bottle. I find these pretty cheap in like the $2 shop. If you can't find one of them or don't want to buy them, that is fine. You don't have to have one. I just put watered down acrylic paint inside, and it's great for making the scribbles that I make and making beautiful marks on the page. If you have one of those, we can use that. Just an extra if you wanted to do additional techniques and additional interest, but not essential. We're going to need a few things to create some shapes. Just old bottle tops, a piece of sellotape, the inside of like a sellotape holder, anything you can find around your house that you can dip in paint and then press onto paper that makes marks. So just go around the house and see what you can find. You only need one or two. We'll need a container for some water, an old yogurt tub, any kind of container to hold your water. We're then going to need some threads. If you have just one color is fine. It doesn't have to be a fancy color. It can be just black or white. I love using this to add texture. If you can match the color to one of your paints, that's great because we're going to coordinate. If you can't, that's also fine. So one thread or one reel of thread if you have. We're then going to also need some embroidery thread or something to sew with. I use a thicker embroidery thread. It's more visible in the project. If you don't have this, you can just use the sewing thread. That's fine too. And again, if we could get this color to match one of your paints, just for the effect that I'm trying to get, again, not essential. If you only have one paint color and one thread color and they're different, that'll work fine too. We'll make it all work. Then you'll also need, if you're going to be using the embroidery thread, you'll need an embroidery needle for the sewing we're going to do. If you only have regular thread, then just a regular sewing needle will work fine. Something to mix your paints on. I have the lid from the yogurt tub that could work. If you have one of these, that's great too, or even just a piece of paper. I use scrap paper for mine sometimes, but something to mix your paint on if you don't want to use a piece of paper. Then I also have some hole punches. If you have a smaller hole punch, would be great for something they're going to do near the end of the series. If you don't, that's fine. And then just a regular one, we're going to punch some holes in some paper to create texture, if you have that. And then also if you have punches like a round punch, the different sizes, bring those along. Or even if you have different shapes, that'll also work. Not essential. Some fabric, any kind of fabric you might have, just a little strip or a strip or two would be great. I sort of tend to find old work shirts that are either stained or can't be worn anymore, the cotton ones, and I just use bits of that. I think those work great. If you have any cheesecloth, bring that along. I love working with cheesecloth. You'll just need a small piece. If you don't have cheesecloth, a piece of tissue paper would also work, or even just white thread, something to create the texture underneath. But cheesecloth I use a lot, and it really goes a long way. You get quite a big piece. We get it here sort of at the $2 shop or at the craft store for a really low price, and it's really a big piece and you only use a little bit at a time. But if you have some in your stash, bring that along. We're also going to need some kind of coordinated stamps or stickers. So if you have some stickers that you don't know what to do with that are sort of the same tonal color, bring those along. Or if you have stamps that you have a lot of that you don't know what to do, bring those. Or if you don't have any of these, just cut bits out of a magazine. We're going to do one page where we need lots of little bits. And if you don't have any of this to add, if you bring along a magazine, and you can get free magazines. Well, we get free magazines from the supermarket. This is like a cooking magazine. It has recipes, but there is so many beautiful colors that you can cut out. It doesn't matter about the pictures, but bring along some magazines. We'll be using those quite a bit, and you can bring a free one. It doesn't have to be a fancy, expensive magazine. You can also find some in the op shops or the secondhand stores, normally for $1 or $2. So you could grab some of those. There are a lot of uses for magazines in the mixed media world. If you have a stapler, bring that along. We're going to be stapling some goodies together. I love staples. They create great texture. They're super fun. If you have some gold leaf, we will be doing a gold leaf project. I love working with gold leaf. If you don't have, it's really not essential, but I'm going to be doing a gold leaf project too. If you have any kind of sentiments or little words, bring those along. If you don't, that's fine. You can find words in a magazine. You can even handwrite sentiments. It doesn't matter. We're just going to add them as focal points into our projects. If you have any kind of die cuts or stickers that can add some interest to your page, anything with contrasts. I love working with contrasts. There's a few contrasts in this series. So if you have any kind of die cuts or even scrap paper like this, and then maybe if you have like numbers that you love, little stickers, bring those along. We're going to add everything. And then a piece of thicker cardstock, preferably in white. We're going to be doing our first project on this. If you have something like this, a watercolor paper would also work. Just a piece of copy paper might work too, but that might be a little thin because we're going to do a lot of sort of wet medium on it. So maybe a mixed media or an acrylic paper. Just check through your stash and see what you have. And then a ruler for some tearing. A heat tool if you have to help things dry quicker because I'm impatient, not essential. And I think that is everything. I hope I haven't forgotten. I will list everything also in writing underneath this video just to help you to get your list together. You don't have to listen to this whole video again. I wanted just to quickly explain sort of the idea of what I had, of what you might need. Just again elaborating, you don't need everything here, whatever you have. And if you only have one color paint, bring that along. It doesn't matter that every project we do or every page we do will have similar colors. That is perfectly okay. We're working on techniques and experimenting and having fun. Go through your stash, see what you have, and I can't wait to see you on the 1st of August for episode 1. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the little bell so you're notified every time I upload new content and every time a new video comes up for Art Journal August. Happy creating. I'll see you again soon. Bye.